if it'll start. Okay. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode. Today I'm joined by a guest, a co-host of the Media Pass, a writer for seemingly 20 different websites, and one of the smartest minds in the basketball Twitter space, Matt Issa. How you doing today, man?
Pretty good, Asher. Pretty good. It's really cool to pod with you. I think this is the first time we've ever done that. I know we've talked quite a bit over the last couple of years, but I'm excited. Life's good.
Yeah,
life's pretty good.
So today we're going to do a little bit of an off-season primer for you guys. Talk about the moves that have happened so far, the re-signings, the trade, and then a little bit of a preview for a few teams. So let's start with the elephant in the room. You said you had a spiel on the Giddey Caruso swap. So what's the thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'll say that first of all. Alex Caruso, I've been big on him the last couple of years. Maybe I'm a little bit too high compared to the consensus, but there's no question he's a top 75 player in this league. Okay, top 75 player in this league. Very scalable. When I say scalable, I mean his skill set fits really well on a bunch of different teams. And then he's very cheap, $9 million a year. Again, you only get it for one season, and after that, he's probably going to want a little bit of a pay raise. That'll probably be his last significant contract, as he's on the wrong side of 30 now. But for OKC, it's just basically like they got a better Lou Dort. He matches his physicality. He's a better point of attack defender, better defensive playmaker, better communicator, better rim protector, better shooter now. He's worked on that. Better passer, better closeout tagger, et cetera, et cetera. So he's better Lou Dort. Lou Dort's now expendable. And even if they don't want to trade Lou Dort, it's another great defender who can put the ball on the floor, pass, shoot, right? And they did it without giving up any draft picks, without messing with their cap sheet at all. So, for OKC, put a stamp in it, A+. Great move. For Chicago, okay, it's weird. It's weird because from my experience, anytime... So first of all, I think that people have this misconception, especially the people on Twitter that we see all the time, that there's people in these front offices that are like these cartoon bumbling idiots. Like, think about, you know what I always think about? You ever seen the movie 101 Dalmatians?
Yeah.
You remember those two goons that were with Cruella? They're just like idiots, like just clowns.
Just morons.
Yeah, that's why I think people think of like front office executives. Like, I remember the one that always stands out to me is the Sabonis-Halliburton trade, when the Kings traded for Sabonis, and everyone's like, well, Kings are going to Kings. Like, this is another one, right? Another mess up. And worked out pretty well for Sacramento. We could argue, Halliburton's probably has the higher ceiling than Sabonis, but still, Kings broke their drought. He's a better fit for what they're trying to do over there. So they're not idiots. And I could definitely see a world here where Chicago might come out that way. Now, I'm not high on Giddey. I think that he needs to be on the ball, right? Because he's not a good spacer, and he's also not a good defender. But I don't know how good we got to be. If this is your situation where you're not a good spacer and you're not a good defender, you got to be really good on the ball. And
he's not, to me.
I don't know. We don't know for sure yet where he'll be now that it's his show. Because, he wasn't good on the ball, but in OKC, in the sample size we saw, but that's because he was flanked by either Jalen Williams, who is a average spacer, right, or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, again, like average, below average spacer. So what will it look like when he's actually prioritized? And I still don't know what the Chicago team is going to look like. It's I could definitely see a world, though, where it's like, he's it works for them, and they so here, let me get back to this real quickly. So people are like, they finagled the Thunder. The Thunder finagled the Bulls, whatever, right? So first you have to ask yourself, like, what is Caruso worth? Now, we've talked about he's great role player, one of the best in the league, but he's only got 1 year left on his deal. So you're paying for 1 year of Alex Caruso at a very nice cost. By my estimation, that type of player is worth about a first-round pick and then something at like whatever half of a first-round pick asset-wise would be, like maybe like a second-round pick,
a decent
maybe like
player.
Like a Davion Mitchell type player, like something like that, right? Well, what? Okay, so now you have to ask yourself, like, what does the Chicago front office view Giddey as? To me, I don't even view. To me personally, I don't even view him as like the equivalent of a first round pick, like asset
Yeah,
wise. But that's my evaluation on him. But
yeah,
the whole point of like, think about Moneyball, right? Moneyball was
mhm,
all about like this organization finding these players that were undervalued by the market, right? And so, my evaluation is the market evaluation. Just say that, for instance, what
right.
if the Bulls are to get themselves out of this rut? They're going to need to find players who they value more than the rest of the market.
Yeah,
So maybe Josh Giddey is actually somebody who should be worth 2 first round picks, and they just basically finagled the Thunder. How do like, you know what I mean? So like, I could see the theory behind it, even though I, at the end of the day, would say OKC wins this trade, at least from where I stand right now.
yeah. I would say the Thunder. I mean, you basically summed it up. You have to go through Caruso, Dort, Case and
Hmm.
Wallace, and then you have to meet Chet at the rim. And also, Shea is a pretty decent defender, or a pretty good defender within his own right. And now they, on the trajectory of their offseason, because they still have a lot of cap space, they still have a million first round picks they can trade. If they want to go out and get like a Lauri Markkanen, even though he's ridiculously expensive, the Thunder could probably afford to get that. Like, they might end up being the favorites in the West for me next season, just
That must
based
be
on the
hard for you.
what
That must be a hard thing for you to admit.
it is. Yeah, no, because from my vantage point, it's like all it took was Giddy. Like, there's no one else who could have got offered more. I know that the Bulls think he has like all-star potential and whatever. I don't see that like in the slightest, because to me, you touched on it. He's not a good scorer in the arc. He's not a good scorer out of the arc. He needs the ball in his hands, and I don't think he's particularly good at that either. He's probably his playmaking is probably the best like part of his game, but also I still don't think he's a great playmaker. Like, I think he's a decent playmaker, but I think like okay, he's not Facu Campazzo, but I did watch a non-scoring guard who had to have the ball in their hand or was a negative spacer, and anytime he touched the floor, his team got worse for 2 years, and it's not fun. And he's basically like a 6 foot, what, 7 Facu Campazzo to me,
Hmm.
which there is more value in that than Facu, because Facu was like 5'9", but I still don't think he has the skill set to be an impactful NBA player, especially for like a playoff team. If Chicago ever tries to be, well, not tries to be, if they ever are a competitive playoff team. But to me, it's a home run for the Thunder, and it's a complete strikeout for the Bulls, because you couldn't get one first round pick in there. Like, the Thunder have 5 first round picks next to draft. They're not going to be able to roster all those guys.
Hmm.
Even if you get one of the fake ones, at least you'd be like, hey, we got a first round pick that'll convey into 2 seconds. Like, they can't even say that about anything because they didn't get any picks, not even a second.
Couldn't even. I figured you should have been able to get Aaron Wiggins out of that
Yeah.
too, but
And
I mean, can I devil's advocate this thing just for
sure.
a second? Because you said, okay, so like, let's talk about if they really. So the evaluation is if they view Giddey as all star. If Giddey's an all star and they swapped him for 1 year of Alex Caruso, that's a huge win for Chicago, right?
Yeah.
So how would he get there? I heard you remember that podcast Steve Kerr and Pete Carroll used to have together, flying
Uh,
flying coaches.
Vaguely.
Yeah, okay. So I remember there was an episode where Steve was talking about how right before they were going to draft Kawhi Leonard. Remember, Kawhi's shot completely broken,
Yeah.
right? Chip England saw it and he's like, you know what? It's like it's bad, but like it's just literally this one little variable that causes it to be bad, and I can fix that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Bulls, I know they hired a shooting coach for the first time ever last offseason, and what happened? Caruso's jumper gets better.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who the other improvements were. There's I think 2 or 3 guys on that team whose jumper just got better
Yeah.
from this shooting coach. Can't think of his name. Sorry about that. But like maybe that shooting coach, okay, he saw Giddey. He's like, I can fix his jumper. I can make Giddey a 38% three-point shooter on volume. And then you tie that in with the passing, the aggressiveness of the drive game with his size.
Yeah.
And what if he starts to look like I don't know. This is gonna sound. What if he sounds like? What if he starts to look like a bigger Darius Garland? It's a big win.
Yeah, I don't see the pathway
Right?
for that, but yeah, it would be a big
That I
win.
think I just outlined the pathway. I'm not saying it's probable.
Yeah.
This is me playing devil's advocate again. Right now, I said
Yeah.
that the Bulls lose this trade pretty
Yeah.
handedly. But anytime I feel like this has happened, where we're just these outsiders who dunk on something so hard, usually we turn out being the ones who are wrong. It's never that. It's never that
Obvious.
never that obvious. Yeah, there you go. But that's just my thinking.
I get that thinking, and I do think that people kind of underestimate how difficult it is to be an NBA GM because there's a lot of decisions that need to be made, and but also I think there are some front offices that you can look at and be like they are objectively a pretty poorly run organization, and I think the Bulls are one of them because at the deadline last year we know that there was an offer on the table for Moses Moody, Trace Jackson Davis, and like 2 firsts. One of them was pretty heavily protected from what I've heard. One of them was a legitimate Warriors first round pick in the future. That probably has a lot of value. And they declined that at the trade deadline. So if you trade him 4 months ago, you're walking away with 2 players who I think are better than Josh Giddey, both now and long term, and 2 first round picks, even if one of them doesn't convey. That is a significantly better haul than just Josh Giddey to me. And I think it's all about timing and when you do this stuff, because I just don't think they timed it right. They haven't traded a player until now since August of 2021, if I remember correctly. They could have gotten value for Caruso at any time between then and now higher than Josh Giddey. And even if they really wanted Josh Giddey, they could turn around and flip some of those assets for him and still walk away with more net assets than they did in this trade. So to me, it's a asset mismanagement issue as well as just a trade value issue, because I don't see a realistic pathway for Giddey to become an all-star. I understand the logic behind what you said. I just don't see that ever happening. And I don't think you particularly do either. I think you're just playing devil's advocate, but I'm pretty sure the Thunder have Chip Engle, I think is his name.
Yeah, they took him from the Spurs. Yeah, the guy who fixed Kawhi's shot.
Yeah, he's one of the best shooting coaches of all time. If he couldn't fix Giddey, I have no reason to believe another one could. Yeah, I'm just not high on Giddey. But we've spent enough time on that trade. So let's talk briefly about a couple of the extensions that have been given out. Especially last night, Malik Monk re-signing with the Sacramento Kings on a 4-year, $78 million deal, if I remember correctly. I figured he was going to get a lot more than that, but I guess he probably wanted to stay in Sacramento. What are your thoughts? Because I've seen you tweeting about the Malik Monk thing a little bit.
It's more happiness. So actually, I have a couple of methods I like to use for gauging player value. I don't know if they're great, but they're just my personal methods. They've worked okay for me in the past, and I actually think he's more like a $12 million, $14 million per year guy than a 90. So like for me personally, I'm like, they still kind of overpaid the guy, but you got to keep your dude. But I wonder I guess he must have gotten, just because. So I understand, liking playing in Sacramento. It makes me immensely happy. Honestly, one of my favorite parts of being a human being is that Malik Monk plays basketball for the Sacramento Kings. But because I was hearing, just like the rest of us, I read an article. I think it was James Edwards who reported it, that the Pistons really wanted Monk, and they were willing to. They could clear a 4-year, $120 for him, just $42 million more for 4 years than he got in Sacramento. So my thinking is maybe he found out that that wasn't going to happen anymore. The Pistons, now that they've maybe the new regime there now is like, you know what, we don't feel like paying Monk that much money. We want to prioritize something else. So maybe that changed. And Monk's like, why would I even wait it out? Let me give my team the flexibility to go into the draft, to go in the rest of free agency, to maybe make a trade. Knowing that they have me instead of having to look for a replacement for me in the draft or whatever. So maybe that's what happened. I'm not entirely sure. And then there's always the thing that nobody talks about where it's like maybe the Kings just said, "Hey, man, on the books it'll say we're paying you $19 million a year, but like we'll backdoor you another 7, 8." I'm serious.
Yeah.
Like that probably
Yeah.
happens. I'm not.
Probably.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. To me, I think this is a good value for Monk, at least league wide, because I think realistically he should be probably a little less than he is, but he's a very good shot creator for either like a second unit or like as a secondary starter. And for the Kings, they didn't really have an avenue to replace that if he left, or at least as well as Monk did it. So I like this for the Kings. And I thought Monk was kind of on the trajectory to become someone's Jordan Poole contract a little bit. So I'm glad that didn't happen, because I want to be like, Malik Monk is good. And he would be good even on that contract. But, it's a little different to say, oh, he's like a pretty good role player on a $30 million a year contract as opposed to $19 million a year contract. So the Pistons fans are probably happy that didn't end up happening, because good Lord, that fan base has been through enough as it is. But I like this for the Kings. I think, a couple things follow a couple of different ways, and they're a playoff team again last year. So this year, even though the West is getting better and better, as much as that pisses me off to say, they still have a shot at making the playoffs. And if you're the Kings, making the playoffs is basically raising a banner. So like, might as well keep your guys that got you there. And I think it's a pretty fair contract on both sides.
I'm telling you, man, those Kings, bad shooting luck last year. Okay, terrible shooting luck. Keegan Murray gets better. Make a trade to get a better power forward. Keon Ellis gets better. They could be feisty, man. Yeah. I wouldn't count them out. They could be feisty.
Yeah, they could absolutely scare a team in the first round, I think. And then we had Pascal Siakam resigning, which I think we all kind of saw coming. I didn't think there was anyone who was like, Pascal? Yeah, no, he's going to leave. It seemed pretty straightforward that, we got to the Eastern Conference Finals. We're going to run it back. Here's your money. Here's my signature. Both parties are happy with it. I think it's a pretty straightforward, just run it back sort of situation for them.
Yeah.
And then let's get into some fun preview stuff. Huh?
One more. I don't know if you saw this, because I know you woke up a little late today, but I think Hartenstein plans on re-signing with the Knicks.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not see that. No, that actually changes things. I thought he was.
You were hoping he was going to be on the Thunder?
I was not hoping that he was going to be on the Thunder. Far from it, but I did think he was probably going to be a Thunder. No, if he's going back to the Knicks, I like that a lot for him, because his push shot, man, push shot. He's also a very good defender, pretty good playmaker. It really boggles my mind how good he is now, because like he was just bouncing around the league from team to team for like his first 3 or 4 years, including the Nuggets, who he looked bad there because he was playing with Facu Campazzo as his spacer. But anyway, he bounced around, and then he just got good all of a sudden. And it was like, Isaiah Hartenstein, top 30 center in the NBA, huh? And this year he was maybe a top 20 center in the NBA, Easily. Like you could make the argument top 15 potentially. And like Mitchell Robinson is also probably in that range. So to have the versatility of either Hartenstein or Robinson, depending on what you need for the Knicks, that does a lot for you schematically. And also just both of them have kind of dealt with injuries at different points in their career, especially Mitchell Robinson. So to have two players of a similar caliber able to fill in for the other one if one gets hurt is a big deal.
Mm.
What do you think about Hartenstein back to the Knicks?
Great for them. And that's another one where he is going to be taking a discount then, at least compared. Mm-hmm. I wonder if these guys are just getting intel like, hey, you're not going to get the numbers you think you are. You're better off staying where you are. Maybe that's it. Also, in the report, sorry to cut you off, but in the report, it also said that they're looking to shop Mitchell Robinson now. So
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
Okay. But also like there are only like 5 teams with cap space at this point. So I don't know how many albatross contracts are actually going to be handed out. Unfortunately, this can transition us a little bit. Unfortunately, I think one of them might be KCP. And I don't think it's going to be the Nuggets that give it to him at this point. From what I've heard, there's rumblings that he's going to get a bag from a team or two, and anything over a certain amount makes the Nuggets a little queasy to try and match that, which I don't agree with in the slightest. Because like there's a formula for the Nuggets, and it is the Jokic Murray 2-man game, Gordon in the dunker spot, 2 elite spacers in the corner. If you lose KCP, you lose an elite spacer, and you don't have someone in-house to replace that, and you probably don't have the assets to go get one. And also on defense, he's probably like a top 10, top 15 guard perimeter defender in the NBA. You can't lose that, man. You can't lose a top defender and a top shooter. That's just not something you can afford to lose if you're trying to compete for a championship, which you have the best player in the world. You have you have won a championship with this team. You can win another one if you just, don't draft 2 guys in the second round, give them both guaranteed contracts, and take up 7 roster spots with people who aren't really going to play. If you manage your assets correctly, this team can absolutely win another title. If they don't blow a 20-point lead to the Minnesota Timberwolves in a Game 7, we might be talking about them still in the NBA Finals, because I think they give them the Celtics a bit better of a series than the Mavs gave them. But I just, it would really signal to me that they're cheaping out if they don't match KCP, unless it's like $30 million a year, because I do get you don't probably want to pay KCP $30 million a year, but if it's like 25, if it's like 3 years, $75 million, match that, because KCP is someone you can always trade. He will have trade value. He's not a MPJ where he has the back issues and you don't know if you can trade him. He's not one of these contracts that, you don't know what the guy's going to look like in 4 years. So if a team gave a contract to Russell Westbrook a couple of seasons ago and he was it's not a Chris Paul contract. He is a 3-and-D guard who the shooting will not go away. The defense might take a bit of a hit as he gets older, but he's still going to be a smart defender. He's still going to have, some of the best hands in the NBA. And if they let that walk because of the second apron, which is the reason that's being thrown around, I think that's just an excuse. I like that ownership and front offices are using to justify being cheap, because there are significant restrictions with the second apron, but also if you have a championship core, you should just eat those those restrictions, in my opinion.
Yeah, sorry, I was just searching up how old he is. 31. Okay,
Yeah.
so you signed him 3-year deal. Yeah, you get him into his mid-30s. So what is the max without getting into the second apron? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I think. Well, the thing is, Zeke Najee's contract kicks in, so I don't think there's really a way to keep him in a realistic price range without going into the second apron, assuming Zeke Naji stays on the roster. If you get rid of Zeke,
they could always trade him a pick.
You would assume, but I don't think there's many people out there wanting to take on that contract. Because do you know what extension he got?
Not off the top of my head. I could do a quick spot rec.
No, it's 4 years, $32 million.
Okay.
Which,
yeah.
$8 million for Zeke Naji, who was worse than the husk of DeAndre Jordan this past year, is a little rough. But
I could see a team taking a flyer on him as like a switch 5.
Hey, Arturis. Yeah, to me, I think you could pay him around. I think if you pay him, you go into the second apron. If you trade Zeke, I think you can pay him like 22, 23, somewhere in that zone. I don't know that for a fact. That's just off the dome.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you go into the second apron regardless. Especially even if you bring him back and trade Zeke, you do have to bring in some more players to complete the roster, and I think at that point you'll probably be a second apron team. So at some point, this team is going to have to eat the second apron. Next season they're going to have to re-sign Jamal and Aaron Gordon. You can't let either of those walk. Like they're not really replaceable. KCP in theory is kind of replaceable. I don't think that myself, but his skill set is something that you're like, there are 3-and-D guys in the league, not to the extent that KCP is, and they don't do the mid-range stuff that he does. I love KCP. I think letting him walk would be a huge mistake if I haven't made that clear already. But I think in theory, he's easier to replace than like an Aaron Gordon or Jamal Murray. Because AG is just, he's kind of like his own archetype of guy where like you and Alex talked about like non-shooting wings and all that type of stuff, but he does a lot of stuff that a lot of those guys don't. Like he can kind of do the second, like tertiary ball handling stuff like he did in the Timberwolves series. And he's a very, very, very good defender and, makes the lob thing work. So I don't think you can afford to let either of those guys walk, but I also don't think you can afford to let KCP walk. Like to me, if you walk away this summer as the Nuggets and you get like Day'Ron Holmes at 28, which I would love, but then you let KCP walk and you just kind of bring back the same roster with like a couple vet minimum guys because they can't afford to sign anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
They already used their taxpayer mid-level exception on Reggie Jackson. I think that if they trade him, they will have access to it again. But they have that, and then they have nothing else. So you're going into next season with either Reggie Jackson or Jalen Pickett as your backup point guard. Don't love that. You're going into it with around the same roster if you don't make moves as you were last year, minus KCP in this situation. And I just don't like that. And it's seeming like the front office just kind of is falling asleep at the wheel to me a bit at the moment.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to like the bumbling, stumbling 101 Dalmatians thing. I don't know about that. I get like how it can feel that way, but they do. I agree with you where it's like one of those things you need to keep him. Even at least with Monk, like that archetype, a combo guard, you could kind of like I was looking at some stuff like they could have maybe get Spencer Dinwiddie on a veteran minimum, and you hope he can get back to where he was a couple of years ago, or like Monty Morris. Maybe you get D'Anthony Melton on the because then they would have had their non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is probably what I think Melton will go for, even though I think he's worth a little bit more than that. But they need like the thing with KCP is like in theory, the 3-and-D archetypes, like there's a lot of them. But the thing is, every team has been looking for.
There's not a lot of them.
Yeah, there's not as many as you think.
Yeah.
It's always like some caveat with them where it's like if he could just defend a little better, or if he could just shoot a little better, or if he could just attack closeups a little better. But then there's KCP who just is that. He's the realized version of that. So like now they need to keep him. I think even in the mid-20s, you got to pay the piper. I don't know. Yeah, it's like you said. If you want to win big, you gotta be paying in the
second apron.
Second apron. There you go.
Yeah.
But I think that's all there needs to be said about it. He's an elite role player. That's the beauty of this team is they have so many elite role players to go along with their 2 stars. Yeah,
that's sort of all that needs to be said there. But the Sixers plans are quickly falling apart, or at least the plan A, plan B. They're down to about plan D, if I had to guess. Paul George, Shams tweeted out, I think it was yesterday, that the Sixers' interest has significantly waned in him. So it's looking like that's not going to happen. Caruso got traded, and that was like a target for a lot of at least fans of the Sixers. I don't know if the Sixers themselves were targeting him. I'd imagine they at least had talks. But it's really funny to me, the cap space plan with them, because this is not a good free agency class to have cap space in, really. And they keep kicking the can down the road. And it's finally come this season where the only players I think they have under contract for next season right now are Embiid, Maxey once he resigns, and Ricky Council. So you have 12 roster spots to fill. You have I think, 67 mil and cap to do it. You know, you have enough space for a max contract. Who are you giving a max contract to now that like Paul George is off the table, Pascal Siakam is off the table? Like, do you throw 40 mil at OG Anunoby and hope the Knicks don't match that? What do you think the Sixers should do at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it all has to go in one place. I really like shout out to my guy Hoop Venue. He's been on this for a while, but I like the idea of DeMar DeRozan on that team. I think he's still got a lot of juice. And the cool thing is like they could, you know, provide him with plus spacers. Like he could be the only negative spacer on the floor. Maxi's a plus spacer, Embiid's a plus spacer for the 5 spot.
Yeah.
If they re-sign Oubre, who I think they should look into, they could re-sign Batum. That's another one. I think that's what they should do is like just give like DeRozan like above average starter money if that's what he's willing to go for to win. Above average, maybe give him like 27, 28 million, 27 to 30 million maybe on like a short-term deal. And then just, you know, bring back Batum. They had a nice little cast of role players. If they could bring back Batum, Melton, Oubre, I think that's maybe more where they should go. I guess I kind of like the idea just because I think Anunoby's so valuable and he would work so well next to Embiid and Maxey. Maybe you throw the bag at him, but then you risk. We talked about the market thing. It's like how valuable is the guy if he's getting paid way above the market value for him? So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm curious what happened with the Paul George thing and why their interest is waned on him.
Yeah, because I'm not sure what happened there. Like we were hearing all these reports.
Maybe it is that they sorry. We're we haven't podcasted yet a lot. We're talking over each other. But maybe it's because they don't want to like they're like we could probably get DeRozan who's like, you know, 88-90% of the player Paul George is at this point for a little bit cheaper, shorter term deal. I saw they've been in on the Ingram talks.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he would be a solid fit for the same reason DeRozan would be a solid fit. That's for sure.
Yeah. My question with both of them would be because to me, both of them are most effective on the ball. Like they both are plus playmakers, I think, on the ball. But Brandon Ingram doesn't do, from what I've seen, you've watched more of him than I have, but from what I've seen, doesn't do a ton of the connective passing stuff, at least to the same level that he does on the ball passing. And both of them are not high volume 3-point shooters. DeRozan is a worse 3-point shooter than Ingram is. Ingram did have a couple of seasons where he shot more than 6 threes a game, like a couple of years ago with Lonzo. So I think Ingram, I could see doing the shooting thing more because to me, the most effective version of the Sixers is with Maxey and Embiid as the two highest usage players. Maybe Maxey is third to second player, but I think the thing that's so attractive about Paul George is that he's basically like a star version of what KCP would be for them. You know, like not the defender KCP is at this point in his career, but can still lock in for a couple of quarters if you need him to. Is still a very good 3-point shooter. Can still put the ball on the floor. Like he was very scalable with what you could do with him. If you wanted him to be a role player, basically, he could do that. If you wanted him to be a ball handler, he could do that, depending on what, you know, the game plan is going into the night. And I don't think Ingram or DeRozan are quite that like pluggable just into a system.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is like, the theory behind that is Maxey's such a great off-ball player, and it's more so that when you're dealing with those non-Embiid minutes, you have one of those ball handle. Again, it's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, Paul George is the better fit, but do you really want to give him a 4 or 5 year max contract? You know what I mean? Where you could get one of these guys, maybe not so much Ingram, but you could get DeRozan on a nice little short-term deal that's a little bit cheaper. So I'm really interested to see how they. It is funny, like you said. I think cap space is just a little overrated. I thought we learned that lesson a little while back, and it's like kind of makes you question. Daryl Morey is a guy who's lost his fastball. Man, he's no longer ahead of the market, and you're starting to realize, okay, this guy's not all that anymore. Where he's kind of still cruising in like 2013 mode, where it's like, oh, cap space, like this is awesome. But now you realize, what do you do with
Yeah,
that? It's like
like
it's like, it's like you can't take it with you, man. I don't know. But you
yeah,
can. Yeah.
because to me the Sixers are such an odd team because they
Mm,
have a very very like top of the league player in Embiid.
mm,
They hit a home run with the Maxi pick. He's developed into an all-star. I think he could probably, be close to an all NBA player at some point in his career. He's still, I think, like 22 or something. He's young, and people sometimes forget that. But like, he will be there after Embiid's there. You have a star to follow him up. Um, but you just haven't had the right cast of role players around Embiid at any point in his career, whether it be, when Colangelo was there, when Hinkie was there, when, Morey is here now.
mm.
Um, like, even the closest they got was that Jimmy Butler team to me. But even then, that was a weird kind of mishmash of guys a little bit because you had Jimmy, you had Tobias, you had Ben, who all are kind of like best on the ball. Well, not Tobias, but that was a kind of a weird fit for a couple of those guys, but it was still a good team. And now you're completely just washing away any semblance of, the players you've had before, unless they bring back, like you mentioned, an Oubre, a Batum, DeAnthony Melton. Um, and I'm curious to see what Morey does because he's had the Tobias Harris excuse where he's like, I have Tobias Harris. I can't really trade this contract. It's restricted me from making moves in free agency, so on and so forth. Now we get to see what hand he's had for like 3 years. Um, and I feel like they just should have done a better job maximizing Embiid's window because we don't know how long he has left.
Yeah. There's also, you mentioned Jimmy Butler. That's another name. I think at the end of the day, you're kind of, you're in this weird conundrum where you're like, if you get, say, like DeRozan, I think it raises your floor, right? Where it's like, if Embiid has to miss 20, 30 games, DeRozan and Maxey, that'll win you a lot of basketball games, right?
Right.
But if you get Anunoby, it's like the ceiling of that when they're all clicking. You got Maxey and Anunoby and Embiid. We'll say for the sake of just to say shit,
Mhm.
Batum comes back, maybe Melton, right? That 5-man unit. It's a
Yeah.
pretty scary 5-man unit. Um, but if Embiid gets hurt again for 20, 30 games, it's going to be the Maxey OG Anunoby show, which is like, I think it's good, but it's not as good as like the DeRozan Maxey show. So it'll be interesting. I think there's a lot of different ways. I think they're probably the most fascinating team in terms of teams that are actually
Mhm.
consequential. I feel like we should get into this. I think there's
Okay.
actually like a handful of teams where it's like, there's not going to be 10 teams that are in the inner circle of title contenders heading into next
Yeah.
season. We'll probably have like 4 or 5. Boston's in there. Unless Denver really fucks up, they're in there. OKC's now solidified themselves in there to me.
Yeah. To me
After
too.
that, it's like there's probably like 2 more teams that could fit in there, but there's a bunch of teams who have like a lot of potential to get there. It's just, can they push the right buttons? And the 76ers are one of them, of course. The
Mhm.
Cleveland Cavaliers, that's another one. The New York Knicks is another one.
The
The Dallas
Timberwolves.
Maverick, the Timberwolves, the Dallas Mavericks. You could talk about that. Honestly, and this one would take some really, really nice button pushing,
Yeah.
but the Atlanta Hawks could.
Really.
If you think about it, I mean, you got Jalen Johnson, one of the guards. If you trade him for the right, like, wings to flank them, they were pretty okay. Last year at the end of the season, they were like a +7 with like DeJounte Murray, rim running center,
Hmm.
Jalen Johnson, and then Vit Krejci and Bojan Bogdanovic, right? So if they can like
Yeah.
like that team building formula where it's like one of the guards, Jalen Johnson, one of the bigs, and then 2 really good 2-way. Like that's a really really good team. I'm talking like, especially if it's like Trae Young they keep. That's mid. They could be a mid 50 win team.
What was the
Um,
sample size on the DeJounte lineup you were talking
it
about?
was like 12, 13 games when
Okay.
Trey was
So,
hurt.
okay.
Yeah, it was solid, but it's proof of concept that
Yeah.
that idea. One of the guards, probably Trae Young, preferably.
Probably.
I don't think Dejounte could do that, but my point, anyways, I think the Kings could really surprise some people. Excuse me, not the Kings, the Hawks, and then the other one's probably the Pelicans. if they trade
Yeah.
Ingram for the right assets.
If
I
Zion's
think,
healthy.
Zion healthy, the way Trey Murphy played in the playoffs was really impressive. And then CJ McCollum was awesome last season. So they pushed the right buttons. I can see that. But I think that's like the cool thing about this deadline, this offseason is like you got like 7-8 teams you're really watching to see who's gonna stand out and put themselves in that inner circle with the other teams we mentioned.
Yeah, because I think the Pelicans are so deep. Like it's absurd. Like Zion, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, like they have so many forwards and wings that are just so good. It's like, what can you give them out to the rest of the league? Can we redistribute the wealth a little bit here? Like, and also CJ was great last season, like you said, and they're getting rid of Valanciunas, who I think a lot of the problems last year can go back to Valanciunas and how he kind of restricted some of the schemes you could do defensively. Because I think Willie Green is a really creative coach. I think he can do some things defensively that, having a slow-footed drop big kind of restricts you from having. So if they get who would be really good for them? Not so much on offense, but on defense, Nick Claxton. That would be a really fun addition for them. Claxton on the Thunder might work too. Claxton is a free agent I don't hear enough people talking about because he's unrestricted. He can go wherever he wants, and he could be very good for a lot of teams.
I'm worried about Claxton.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We were supposed to have an enhanced pod come out on the YouTube channel about Nick Claxton and my fear of him. Alex never got around to posting that, but neither here nor there. I think that archetype, this switch five, who can't really do anything for you on offense, is starting to come out of style. I think because a couple of years ago, it was like when the Warriors were like first bursting onto the scene and all that stuff. Like it was really valuable to have that switch five. We could kind of get on Curry and stuff. But I think now that we've kind of learned like that switch, because I think a couple of years ago we fell under the mistake that switching is the best form of defense. If you don't have switching personnel, you're at a disadvantage, right? But in reality, great communication, great rotating, great timing, that is the best defense, right?
Yeah.
Like look at the Nuggets. They play at the touch most of the time, which was like, a couple of years ago seen as like a weakness when you're big, had to play at the touch. But in reality, if you communicate the right way, that's the best defense right there, because you get all of the benefits of drop coverage without the trade-offs of it, right? Where you're not conceding the pull-up and everything, but you're also not fully dedicating to the ball, but you're also not switching and letting them dictate the matchups, right? And so anyways, that's a spiel. But I think that switch five is losing its novelty. And then also the game getting more physical is a little detrimental to somebody like Claxton, who's like more of a frailer guy. So, and he's not the again. And like you'd say, what about Wemby? What about Chet? Well, Chet's a supreme spacer, great closeout attacker. So he has that. And then Wemby's, 7'7" catch radius, the best rim protector in basketball. So I think they'll be okay.
Yeah.
But that's, I don't know. I think he's honestly, I could see him definitely, like, to sound like Max Kellerman here, I could see him like falling off a cliff in terms of his like value, where it's like in last season, so not this past season, the one before that, I was like, oh yeah, Nick Claxton can be like, he's top 15 center. He's like, that's the way like we're looking at Hartenstein right now. Is the way I used to look at Nick Claxton, but now I'm kind of like, probably like the next season will be like a fringe starter to me. I don't know. That's just where I'm at with him.
That makes sense, and I do think it's lost some of its value even without taking into like, just because it's small guards and guards in general are less of a threat now. It's more bigger wings and forwards. And I think switch fives are a little less effective on those guys typically than they would be on guards. So I do see what you're saying. I guess I am still living a couple of years ago where I'm like, Nick Claxton, just because he's, like lob threat, switch five, really good rim protector, in theory at least. And I think that next to, like, I think the Thunder would still work with that, because I think.
I'm sorry, I'll say this. We've never seen him with like a traditional, like Trae Young type point guard. So maybe he unlocks like a new gear there. But like, he's not a DHO guy like Hartenstein, not a spacer like Chet, doesn't attack closeouts like Chet. Like You know, I don't know. That's just my thing with Claxton. I hate to be the wet blanket on that one, but this is where I'm at with him. Like
That's
some like
fair.
we have all these up and coming. Like it's like the way is like all these guys are up and coming. I mean, somebody's got to we got to see some downhill guys. Guys falling down the rankings. Not everybody can be a top 50 player in the league. So
Yeah, that's fair. Not everyone. The league's just so talented now.
mhm,
It goes through like it. The fashion trend thing of like every 10 years, the thing that was cool 10 years ago comes back.
mhm.
We're kind of seeing that in the NBA with centers, and I think it'll be interesting to see the talent evolve over the next few seasons because we're in a spot where everyone is so good that like fives are back, centers are back. Like we're not in the DeMarcus Cousins era where there were like two good centers maybe. We're in an era where you can legitimately have a case that a lot of these centers are really good. Um, and I'm curious to see kind of how the physicality aspect of it, to see if like maybe post ups come back a little more than we've seen. Maybe like I'm just kind of curious to see how the game evolves.
So
Um, yeah,
not to unnecessarily plug myself, but I actually did a study with
yeah,
Straven MBA about 2-3 months ago. Um, so basically, I was looking at the weight of the top 10 centers in Darko by year from like 1967 to now. And right, if you look at it like on a graph, right, the 1966, 1997, the play-by-play
mhm,
era, right? 1997 average weight's like in the mid 250s of a
yeah,
starting center. So you get the big bulky, think Alonzo Mourning, Rick Ewing, right?
yeah,
And then um, it starts to go down, and then it peaks. Well, what's the opposite of peaks? It
uh, anti peaks.
anti peaks, right? In the mid 2010s, the Warriors era, right, where it's like centers, the top 10 centers, the best centers in the league are as light as ever, right?
Yeah,
But ever since then, it's been coming up and up, and now we're back right around maybe we're like 2-3 pounds less than we were in 1997. So like it's basically proving your theory where it's like the big bulky center is because what happened is basically back then guys used to be just big, right?
yeah,
Size was whatever, just size. But you know what's better than pure size is pure skill, which is what was happening right in the mid 2010s where you get these skilled guys who aren't that big but they're skilled, and being skilled is better than just being big, right? But you know what's better than just being skilled is being big and being
and
skilled.
skilled.
Like you get the Jokic, you get the Embiid, you get the Davis, right? And so
Mhm.
that's kind of where we're at now. It's like a full circle thing. And I wonder what you're saying. I wonder if maybe 10 years from now it'll be like that Nick Claxton, like a supercharged version of
Yeah,
Nick Claxton. But I guess we'll see.
Wemby in 10 years is gonna be, oh god, the dude. Wemby is so fucking fun. He's just
He's
uh,
not fun to me. Can I say that? I don't think he's fun. It's like he's great. He's
how
insane. He's insane. But how could it be fun when all everyone does is talk about him?
because it's
That's
fun.
I don't know. The thing I've always enjoyed about basketball and why I'm drawn to the sport is like
Mhm.
it goes back to the Moneyball thing, just like finding those guys in the weeds. Like I'd rather talk about Aaron Wiggins than I would Yama. That's a personal problem. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong. Like, Wemby
yeah,
is like next season he'll be a top 15 player in the league. I'm sure of it. Right? He'll be insane. He
yeah.
might be the greatest player that ever lived. Not saying anything like that. I'm just saying like he's like not even one of the 100 things I like most about the NBA.
Yeah, that's crazy to me, but
That's
I
my
see
hot
what you're
take.
saying. I
That's
see
my
what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah, because to me, I'm typically like you, where I'm like, oh yeah, no, let's spend 20 minutes talking about KCP instead of
Mm-hmm.
whoever. Like I make videos on like, or I'll write articles on Sekou Doumbouya. That's who like
Mm-hmm.
my second ever article was on. But also, how could I not like the 7'5" guy who's working out with Jamal Crawford that can pull up from the logo? How could I not like the 2K demigod? It's
Yeah.
like, but also I hate it because he's in my conference and I'm gonna have to deal with that for the next like 15 years. Um, yeah, but we're running on time. We wanted to get you out of here at a certain point. So uh, also, not unnecessarily plugging yourself. You're here. Plug yourself by all means, and before we head out, is there anything you'd like to plug that you're working on now?
I'm trying to think if there's any other players I wanted to say something about really quickly before we go. I know it's bad podcasting, but I was thinking, I mean, Kuzma. We got to think Kuzma, Zach LaVine. Those are names
Denny
to think
Avdia?
about. Denny Avdia, man. Whoever, if he got traded, that'd be the luckiest team on earth.
Yeah.
Ayo Dosunmu could be had. I saw him on KOC's article. That made me smile seeing him. Day'Ron Sharp. That's a big. Alex has been big on Day'Ron Sharp. I don't know if you've talked to him lately about it. Big Day'Ron Sharp guy these days. But yeah, you'll have to. I haven't heard from him in like 2 days. I hope he's doing all right, man. It's not typical me and him to go that long without speaking. But he might be doing something right now. He's an adult, unlike me. Yeah, plugging myself. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. That's where I post most of my stuff that I do at MattIssa15. That's at
Link will be in the description.
ISSA15. But yeah, I'll be doing stuff all off season. I think I want to do a lot of historical stuff and a lot of stuff on the upcoming 2024 rookies, which I'm more excited about than most people because, again, it's just a bunch of role players, which is like my jam. Everyone's like, this class is so weak. I'm like, this is freaking awesome. But yeah.
To me, it's a bunch of role players who I can easily see the floor falling out on for most of them.
Yeah, all of them have like some really damning flaws. Like I was watching Jacoby Walter before I got on this podcast, and I'm like, this guy he is not afraid to shoot. Great release, 6'10" wingspan at shooting guard. It's awesome. But I'm like, wait, he can't dribble. Can't really get to the rim. Not a good passer. He gets beat off the dribble all the time at the point of attack. I'm like, man, this guy's got some he's got all these guys have some really damning flaws. And it's I know every prospect in history of everything has had flaws, but I'm like, man, these flaws are really bad.
Jacoby to me is not a first round prospect in this draft.
Really?
Yeah, because he's a 3-and-D guy who didn't shoot well in college and can't defend really that well.
His shot diet is crazy.
Yeah, I will give it that. And also, volume is more of an indicator than percentage at a certain point. But I don't think he had a great free throw percentage from what I remember.
79%.
Yeah, which isn't like bad, but it's not outlier either. Yeah. And like, I don't know. I just have a hard time buying in on a 3-and-D guy who's like kind of a decent to good shooter and not a good defender from what games I've seen. Yeah. Someone I think you would like. Nikola Duricic. Watch him. I think you'd really like him.
Okay.
He's like a projected second rounder in this one. I have him 13th on my board. He's a 6'8" like jumbo creator. So, love those. But yeah. All right. So thank you guys for watching. Matt, all his links will be in the description. Media Pass will be in the description. Watch that. I've done a podcast with Alex. Now I've collected the Infinity Stones. I've done one with Matt. So, yeah, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, all that. And I will see you guys soon. Adios.